Okay, this video, these thoughts, I wanted to bring up this idea of how you can fix the economy. Now, the problem with this is that some people don't want to fix it. Some people want new slavery. People who are at the top don't want to share. They are trying to make it so they don't have to ever share again. But there are ideas you could use to fix the economy. And a lot of these ideas would work if people would take interest. Some of this is really amazing, and I've had some thoughts about this. I've even felt some inspiration about it. Um, but before you go into how to fix the economy, you have to talk about where the problems are. And those problems, when you have to identify those to figure out where the fix needs to occur. Now, if Trump gets elected, okay, he won the election, yeah, but he still has to survive getting into office. When he gets in office, he's going to have so much to fix. It's going to be an uphill battle, and the amount of damage to the economy done by certain people, it's so massive on a level that is, it's almost, it's like trying to climb Mount Everest on how to fix it. And the reason for this principally all comes down to class warfare, social class ranking, and class systems. In the economy, the elites hold all of the cards right now. They're not sharing any of them. They've also brainwashed your kids, and they've ruined and influenced the schools in a harmful way. And the middle class and the poor, I should say what's left of the middle class, because the middle class is being eaten by the elite class, and the poor class is surging and taking on new levels. We used to think of the poor class as just the poor class alone. Now you have the poor, the starving poor, and homeless poor, and there's also the new poor, which are people who are surviving. They have skills, they don't even have problems, they're just locked out of the economy. That shouldn't even happen. And all this comes down to is social class ranking and class systems, which create class warfare. And to fix the economy, you have to kind of look at this and figure out how you can get those three classes to work with each other more and interact. But you can't get them to do that because, first, the elite class doesn't want to share. The middle class is taught to hate the poor and the rich also. The poor class doesn't always have vices. People are taught to think that the poor deserve to be poor, they did something to themselves. Well, when the middle class started getting eaten, people who didn't really have vices or problems, they're not all drug addicts, they were pushed into the poor class. This started before the mortgage meltdown. It started when the middle class basically was being eaten, which was caused by a lot of the damage started to really occur when the GATT and NAFTA treaties were created. When the GATT and NAFTA treaties were created years ago, decades ago, it started to open the door for the elite class to eat the middle class. With no middle class, you can't have liberty and constitutional values. That's part of why this video will also be in both videos on economic and finance as well as constitutional based learning. Because you need a middle class for everyone for society to function healthily, both economically and for people to have a voice and for people to feel like they have freedom. With no middle class, you've only got an elite class, which is like a 1% elite or a 3% elite, depending on which country you're looking at, and then everyone else is poor, new poor, and starving poor, and homeless poor. There's more than one way of looking at the poor class, but looking at the poor class in social systems is important, and it's important to break them down because it shows you that not everyone is, drug addicts or whatever. They didn't know cause it. Anyway, this has to do with how money circulates. And the economy is always going to be troubled and have problems when these three social classes aren't working together. Part of the problem with the economy is that to fight World War II, the government had to cater to big corporations, mega corporations, and big business. When that opened the door for big corporations to be placed at a higher priority than actual families and citizens. Now you see how this becomes a constitutional issue, and it also has to do with faith and having a free society. You start to move away from a constitutional based society of liberty and faith in moral values when people are second class to big corporations. Now I'm not arguing to get rid of corporations. We want businesses, we want big business also. You want to be able to create systems that can feed people and support families. The problem is not having too much power. So, what happens with this is you need to, if you think about it, the economy is very much like a blood circulation, circulatory system in the body. In the body, your heart pumps the blood through all the parts of your body. It links up with oxygen from the lungs and it gets sent throughout the body. Well, what would happen if the blood was clogged in, say, your leg or your head? It would be you would you would die, or you'd get blood clots. You could die. At the very least, you'd be extremely sick. And in a lot of ways, you can think about the economy like this. It's extremely helpful to think about the economy like this. You can't have the blood all stay in one organ. It has to freely move all throughout the body. And money is actually the same way. You need money to be able to flow all the way back to the heart. Now, with big business, what happens is the money going to big business doesn't go back into the economy. It's going to these elites. To some degree, you need gifted people that can create jobs. That's a gift when it's used right. But, okay, think about your mortgage. When you pay your mortgage and you have your house, the money all these people are paying to their mortgage and rents, it's not going back into the economy. It's going to these rich people, and not a lot of it actually goes back into the economy. They make you think it does because what happens is they'll say, well, my cost of goods sold and my payroll expense in my company, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They say that eats up all their profits. But in some ways, it's kind of a lie because what happens is when you become mega rich, you don't really have a lot of expenses. And that's because you own both, you control so much of the revenue and you control a lot of the expenses of the company as well. What happens is they'll buy these other companies to provide the materials that they use to make their products with. And they basically own their suppliers. And then they have, it's kind of cheating where they own the companies that their expenses are paid to. So in a lot of ways, they're faking their expenses. Uh, it's so they'll say that they owe money to themselves in their second company or their third company, And this makes it look like on paper like they're hemorrhaging money and barely can survive, when they're laughing all the way to the bank because they're making money on the front end and the back end and on all where how all this money is changing hands. So they're sending this money to themselves and saying it's to pay down their debts when it's not. And this is part of why the middle class is shrinking. And the middle class shrinking is the tell on this. Okay? Because if these companies really were bankrupt and not doing any good, the middle class would be bigger. And it's not. And they have more money, not less. Now, what happened with the COVID shutdowns, or sorry, oops, I mean the coughing shutdowns, you didn't hear that word, was that big business, mega corporations, they ate half of the small business market. That tells you they were doing better than they said they were doing. Okay, if they were really hemorrhaging all this money and failing, they wouldn't have been able to use the shutdowns to swallow everyone's business. So, I mean, that's part of the problem. So, how are you going to fix the economy? You have to be able to have all levels of society participate in the economy. And then you need the money to stay in circulation. You can't have it only going to one group of people. You can't have it all going to the poor either. Having a welfare state doesn't work either. Ideally, and it also destroys their hopes and dreams and their ideas of wanting the future. So you need the poor to be brought into some kind of work system, not a slavery system, but a way of giving them the means to take care of themselves and doing it in a hopeful way and not a captivity way. See, the way the economy is working right now, it's a predatory economy. A predatory economy does not work long term because when it starts to fail and have internal problems, it turns to more predation instead of productive means to fix itself. So that doesn't work either. And then as the problems start to grow and get bigger, then it wants to prey more. This is part of why empire building is not helping us and why we need to get out of foreign countries and solve our own problems. Because in empire building, a kingdom, when it has problems or insufficiencies, it, instead of fixing internal problems inside the country and fixing people, it turns to external borders, usually through predatory means. Okay, so now one of the issues is with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a problem, not a solution, because it's not controlled by the government. It's exercising influence and trying to control the government. The more we're tied to the Federal Reserve, the less independence we're going to have, especially because the government has no way of holding the Federal Reserve in check. That tells you there's a problem. Now, there's a solution that could be done to fix this. The government could partner with mining companies in the country, and they could work out a way of when the mining companies bring in the gold, silver, platinum, and other precious metals, that it could be set up with a deal for the government to give them credits and some kind of money certificates and stuff to buy that directly to hold it into the government and use that as created currency, which fuels where the blood loss of the currency in the economy is going. So the idea is however much money you're losing in the economy, you would bring in that much, at least that much each year from mining certificates and gold, and it would be gold backed. It would also You could use that over time to bring back gold backing on fiat currencies. Fiat currencies are extremely dangerous right now, partly because people are being scared to think that they need gold. We don't actually need gold. Money is basically just a means of trading your labor for the things your family needs. So this idea that you're going to fix everything with that you have to dump the currency and go to only gold doesn't solve anything either. But of this other idea of the government partnering with mining and doing some way of um, buying the metals that come in from mining and then using that to create their own currency in government, not owned by external people who aren't even in the government, would be much safer, and it would create real currency and get us away from the problem with fiat currencies. It would also bring back more hope in the government that people need. See, and that's a big deal that you could do that because the Federal Reserve does not care if people starve or if families can live. Part of the problem most countries have, they've got so many problems that family units are having trouble just staying together and surviving to live in their countries. Well, what is the basic building block of a country? It's the family. The unit of the family is how what ensures the future of a country. So when you're thinking about how to fix economic problems, you have to make it so families can live in the country, and that a country is basically a really big mountain of thousands of family units and family lines. And that's more important than gold or silver or precious metals. Now, the problem is when you go on the internet and when you hear them talk about finance and money and the economy, they want you to think that buying Bitcoin or digital currencies or gold or silver are going to solve your problems. That's not going to solve it. What you need is for the government to be and the elite, the middle class, and the poor to all be able to work together in ways that everyone can survive and everyone can interact with the economy and everyone can have a future. If you had that, people wouldn't be upset and businesses wouldn't be failing. Why are businesses and companies failing? They've taken too much blood out of the economy, and that means that jobs and people are devastated, so they can't buy and support these companies that make these things that they want anymore. The demand for goods and services is still there, but they've sabotaged the middle class so much that the economy is a burning dumpster fire. That's why nothing can get fixed now. It's also why um, the new president going into office is going to have a really tough time, even if he has good intentions. And but this idea of how to fix it could work um, with replacing fiat companies with mining currency program. The other thing you could do, other countries, how they solve poverty and help their poor and lower classes is that cities will have an open market area, like a flea market. And it's similar to a farmer's market. And the idea is if you don't have cash or whatever, or if you make your own things, or if you have like a cottage industry, there are laws that support and make cottage industries legal or home industries. And it's actually one of the only ways that you can help poor people is allow cottage industries and promote them. And it works similar to a farmer's market. The problem is in the US, there are areas that have farmers markets, But the cities and municipalities lean too much on them and control them too much, and they want fees. And oftentimes they want fees that are so big that it's hard for people to use that. They need to do away with fees. They also need to have more laws to make it mandatory that cities have a open flea market like on Saturday or once a week where anyone can go and just sell stuff without fees, without control, without a licensure system. Just let people buy and sell with each other. That's how you solve poverty, because you have to bring the lower classes a method of participating in the economy. Having the mega corporations and the big business try and be the only means of helping the poor doesn't work, nor does too much welfare. You might have to have some welfare because there really are disabled people, not only veterans, also. And to do that, you have to create this idea, and you also have to sell it in the educational systems and in the societal programming to try and get people to endorse and go to farmers markets, and not only for big business like a flea market. Places in Russia, places in Europe, and most of the places in the world have these open city market areas where anyone can go, where you don't pay a rent or a licensing fee, where big business doesn't isn't allowed to just push out the little guy. But see, this is part of the problem in the country now is the little guy is pushed out by big business. And that's why you can't get anything fixed. This is one of the things that really needs a change, and that they need to push people to try and really endorse this and make every city or every county should have this kind of a open market area. And it should be a thing where people go to them also. And the idea is not to replace corporations. It just gives people a way of transitioning back into the economy. And they also need to bring back the manufacturing sector as well, but I'll talk about that later. Now, one of the issues with fixing the economy is, um, first off, when a big corporation gets too big, the first thing that happens is they'll go to the international market, and when they do, they start to think about themselves as a country like unto themselves, that they are their country. And they start to think that their home countries are like secondary to them. Their mentality gets all warped and twisted. And it also means that there's no rules about, okay, let's say this company goes abroad. Suddenly all of their stock money, their investment money, all of their operating cash, it's going to these areas abroad that they're starting in. And there's no rules about how much of that money has to stay where that money was actually created. So let's say that company made all their money in, say, New York or Chicago. Uh, well, that's probably a bad example because those places are crime zones. But in a normal area, they should be able to keep some of that money growing in the area that created it if crime and lawlessness were not issues to be factored in, of course. And of course, I've already mentioned how they can cheat on expenses with debts to themselves on companies that they own themselves. There's a lot of abuse with big corporations, but it doesn't mean they're villainous. They just need to be held in check a little bit more, but still allowed to operate. And busting them up won't help anything either. There's also abuses with professional licensing abuse. Professional licensing abuse, or professional licensing in this country was meant to be used to promote quality and give people a way to know someone who really knows their trade from people who don't. It was never meant to create a neo-slavery system where nobody else can participate in the economy. This is part of one of the issues that the U.S. has. That needs to be fixed. Now, there's a problem with one of the issues in the country that needs to be fixed is that Social Security, retirement, and pensions are failing and going to fail. Social Security hasn't failed yet. Nobody gets pensions anymore. Retirement plans are not really working that well, and the bank failures are going to make it so retirement plans eventually fail entirely, and the government having problems is going to cause Social Security fail. Many people won't even get Social Security anymore. Now, what's interesting is there is a way to fix this. All you have to do is you change and make a law that corporations make it so a small percentage of their stock is created and made as a form of worker stock for people who work for that company, and that it's mandatory and it replaces the idea of a pension. So it's just created it's a form of labor gift where they write up this stock from basically nothing, where they say 10 or 20% of our stock is basically for the laborers and people who work in our company. And you'd have to have a way of signing and endorsing it through the government because you're creating it as a form of retirement income to be put away. And you're basically making it so that, okay, a worker who works for a company for 10 or 20 years can't go away with nothing. They can't just, be fired one day and they have no means of supporting themselves, and uh, you know and they have no future when they've paid for their loyalty to that company their whole life. Right now people don't even stay in the same company their whole life. But the idea is you could have this worker stock program where a certain percentage of stock is created in a company each year, just to be assigned as a form of worker credit. Okay, so people who worked for it, they all get this credit every year, and it's a really small percentage. You make it so it's buyable and sellable, so that they can use it as um, a replacement you know, for the company. Instead of the company paying into a pension, they gain these, government credits, which are used to justify where this freely created worker stock is coming from. So it's partnered with government instead. And the idea is to make it so people have a way of something to look forward to, and you could use this to save Social Security and make sure everyone has some form of retirement. It's a better system than Social Security also. And the part of this idea is that as the economy becomes more of a dumpster fire than it is now, these companies, eventually these stocks are going to crash because nobody has any hope or belief in the economy, and they can't interact or even buy from the companies that they want to work for now anyway. So if you were to create this worker stock program, it would let people actually be able to they would start to believe in their companies more. It would restore the faith of the workers in the economy and in the companies they work for. It would also create more positive interaction with how companies work with their employees, and it would create more incentive for both of them to keep each other also. And it would counter poverty. Could be worked to save all of Social Security, retirement, pensions companies, because this would worker stock could be set up to come from government credits given to the company by the government for cooperation, and then have that transition into being real money uh, from the faith of the worker of their working. Um, it would let the economy be rebuilt, and it could be done in a way that the company and the government don't actually have to pay a bunch of money into welfare. It would create a form of anti-welfare in a way by you're not paying out a bunch of money to um, keep people at home. Your incentive is to keep people working. And it could be done in a way that is not socialistic, that is still libertarian. That's the whole point of this. And part of the argument is to counter slavery. Slavery still exists, and it's become a form of neo slavery, financial slavery, and that would be the best benefit of all of this. You need to find ways of keeping people working instead of uh, trying to get away from a predatory economy. I will do more thoughts on this later, but I hope you will review and think about this. It would work. It would, but to get it to work, it would also need people to learn about and promote this idea. Anyway, like and subscribe.